For most of modern history, spending money was a highly visible event. You could see it happen. Cash left your wallet. A bank balance dropped. A credit card bill arrived at the end of the month and reminded you exactly how much had been spent. The transaction felt complete because the payment and the purchase happened together. Over time, that relationship began to change. Financial systems have spent decades making transactions faster, smoother, and less noticeable. Checks became cards, cards became digital payments. Digital payments became one-click checkouts. With each step, the act of spending required less effort, less waiting, and less conscious attention. Buy now, pay later is the latest stage in that evolution. At first glance, the concept appears simple. Instead of paying the full amount upfront, the purchase is divided into smaller payments spread across weeks or months. The total price often remains unchanged. The product remains unchanged. The buyer remains unchanged. Yet something important happens during that process. A £200 purchase no longer arrives in the mind as a £200 decision. It arrives as a £50 decision. That distinction may sound insignificant, but it changes the entire experience of spending. Human beings rarely interact with money as pure mathematics. Numbers are filtered through perception. The same financial commitment can feel completely different depending on how it is presented. A large number attracts attention. A smaller number often feels manageable. The cost has not become smaller, but the immediate psychological weight has. This is one of the reasons companies like Klarna have become deeply embedded in modern retail. Their success is not simply the result of technology. The payment technology itself is relatively straightforward. The real innovation is timing. For generations, consumers were trained to evaluate purchases through total cost. Today, consumers are increasingly encouraged to evaluate purchases through payment size. That subtle shift changes the question being asked at checkout. Instead of asking, "Do I want to spend £200 on this item?" the question quietly becomes, "Can I afford £50 today?" Those questions may appear similar, but they often produce different answers. A person who hesitates at the full price may feel comfortable with the installment amount. The decision feels more accessible. The purchase feels closer. The barrier feels lower. This effect becomes especially powerful because modern shopping environments are built around speed. Online stores are designed to minimize interruptions between interest and purchase. Every additional click, every additional moment of hesitation creates an opportunity for reconsideration. Retailers understand this very well. The easier a purchase feels, the more likely it is to happen. This does not mean consumers are being tricked. Most people understand exactly how installment payments work. The interesting part is that understanding something intellectually does not prevent it from influencing behavior. A person can know that 4 payments of £50 equal £200 and still experience those two options differently. That difference exists because the brain does not process every financial decision through detailed calculation. If it did, daily life would become exhausting. Instead, people rely on shortcuts that allow thousands of decisions to be made efficiently. Most of the time, those shortcuts are useful. The problem emerges when those shortcuts interact with systems specifically designed to reduce spending friction. A single installment purchase rarely causes concern. Even several installment purchases may remain manageable. The challenge appears when multiple small commitments begin accumulating across different areas of life. A clothing purchase becomes 4 payments. A pair of shoes becomes 4 payments. An electronics purchase becomes 12 payments. A vacation becomes monthly installments. Each decision feels independent. Each payment feels relatively small, yet the combined obligation can become surprisingly large. What makes this particularly difficult to track is that the human mind tends to evaluate commitments individually rather than collectively. 4 separate payments of £25 rarely feel as significant as a single £100 expense, even though the mathematics are identical. This creates a situation where consumption can expand gradually without producing the same feeling of financial pressure that would normally accompany larger purchases. The pattern becomes even more interesting when viewed through a historical lens. Every major expansion in consumer spending has been accompanied by a reduction in payment friction. Department store credit accounts helped expand retail consumption in the early 20th century. Credit cards accelerated spending in the second half of the century. Online payments transformed e-commerce. Buy now, pay later continues the same trend. The technology changes. The underlying dynamic remains remarkably consistent. When purchasing becomes easier, consumption tends to increase. This is not necessarily good or bad. It is simply a recurring pattern that appears whenever financial systems evolve. The broader question is what happens when an entire economy begins shifting away from total price thinking and toward payment-based thinking.